All right, I will hand it over to Glenn. Glenn, if you want to get us started.
Okay, can you hear me?
You're good.
Excellent. And do I have control to present? Let's see, share screen.
You
I don't
should be
do
good to go.
these that much. Share screen. I guess share. You guys seeing like a presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, let's see if I could do this guy. All right, perfect. So hi, my name's Glenn. You probably noticed me at some of the different networking events, the open hacks. You probably see me chowing down on lots of pizza and beer and doing a lot of goofing around. But yeah, I'm a software developer, freelance, located in Liverpool. And I've been freelancing since '05. And I usually give this talk. I give this talk to pretty much all the cohorts, just like my experience with freelancing. I mean, other people's might have varying experiences, but I'm just sharing kind of anecdotal experience that I've had as a freelancer. And I don't know, I really love it. But I'll just get basically I have a slide that I've been using, a deck that I've been using forever, and basically kind of goes into the whole thing. But yeah, this is informal. If you have a question, just shout out. And we'll definitely have Q&A at the end, of course. But yeah, if you're moved to ask a question, just go ahead and let me know. I'm not. I'll rely on Max to look at the chat if anyone has a chat question, because I think it's hard to present and look at chat at the same time. But
Not a problem.
all right, yeah, Max is a pro on this. All right, so let's go into this first one. All right, so I'll just share a little bit of my origin story. I grew up in the Hudson Valley, like Poughkeepsie, Kingston, about 90 miles north of New York, in that area. And during the time I was growing up in the '80s, '90s, um, IBM was really king, and like that, they were like it was an employer of choice. At that time, they never laid off anybody. Um, like my dad was a butcher, and we used to kind of look up to the IBMers because they were doing well. I mean, when my dad's company picnic was at a park and we played softball, the IBMers rented out the fairgrounds and actually had rides and ice cream and all that stuff. So I went on a field trip to IBM, I think in the sixth grade, and I was just blown away by everything I saw, just the sheer size of the plant. Disk drives that were the size of like a tire, like truck tires, semi tires, laser printers. The guy doing the talk was very inspirational. He started out in the mailroom, 18, without a degree, and he worked his way up, put himself through college, and now here he is, wearing a suit and doing this tour. So that was like a turning point for me, that I knew I wanted to be in technology. Like, this is the place to be. And that made my life a lot easier after that. Just studied computer science, took math, as much as I could in high school. And then, of course, I uh, went to a local community college with a associates in computer science, SUNY Poly for a bachelor's, and then I went part-time for a million years at SU to get a master's. Um, so let's see. Uh, One of my masters, yeah, I actually have two masters, and about a third of the first masters apply to the second. So that made it a little bit easier. But I got a master's of science and engineering management because I thought I wanted to be a manager. Because when I was growing up, like, everybody wants to be the CEO. You want to be the boss. You make those guys make all the money. They make the best money. So that's what was in my mind, and that's what kind of guided my decisions as I went along, particularly with my advanced education. But, and there's supposed to be a video here, but this video's never worked. I was working at a local company. This was like 2001. and we were working on this huge project. We were implementing SAP. You'll hear me talk about SAP at OpenHack, which SAP it's just a very large software company that thousands of companies use SAP software to run their back end. There's millions of transactions that happen on SAP systems every day. So anyway, this company was implementing SAP, and it was a really rough project. It was a lot of work, a lot of overtime. I'm salaried, right? So overtime, you don't get paid for overtime. I mean, there were overnighters involved, working until 2 a.m. I mean, just this the most intense project I'd ever been on. And I, from a career perspective, I did make a mistake. I had heard that there were other groups of employees. They were also working very hard, and they had deals in place. They had deals that such that if we go after we go live successfully and you stay with the company for a month, you're going to get a 10% of salary bonus. And yeah, so that's a nice chunk of money. And unfortunately, I basically wimped out. I just assumed that the company would do the right thing, that I'd get some kind of a decent bonus, maybe 5% of salary, something. If I could do it over again, I would have gone to the boss and said, "Hey, I heard about this. I know I'm not doing as many hours as this group, but I'm doing some work here. I'd like to get a deal too." But I wimped out. I didn't push it. And after go live, we did go live successfully. I think I got $100 bonus. I got $100. And there's a couple other employees that were in the same boat, and we were just livid. After we saw that check, it was just crushing. And like right at that moment, I knew it's like I can't put this kind of time into a company and not get compensated. Um, it just doesn't make any sense. So that was kind of like the nail in the coffin for my tenure at that company. I did stay there for another few years, strengthening my SAP skills, learning more and more. But yeah, I was like, I'm never going to do that again. There's no way I'm ever going to do that, put that kind of time in, invest that effort, and get shafted, basically. And this happens a lot. I mean, you can't expect companies to do the right thing. You kind of have to make them do the right thing. I don't want to sound negative, but that's just been my experience. It might be better now. I think companies are a little bit better with people now, but by and large, you can't just trust that they're going to do the right thing. Anyway, all right, so that was my origin story. I do have an LLC. There's many types of business types. There's S corporations. There's partnerships. For my situation, the best type of business formation was the LLC, because you do have a corporation, you do get that protection, that limited liability protection, but you don't get double taxed. And you'll see a lot of people in industry. LLC is very popular. I don't know if every state in the country has LLC, but New York has LLC, and I think that's the way to go. So as a person that's self-employed, I am a business, and that means I can write off things. You can write off your computer, your phone, whatever. These are tools for business. So that's kind of another advantage of being independent. But as I say here, don't get too crazy. You never want to get in trouble with Uncle Sam. And that's where some people get into trouble. You might find yourself in an audit if you're trying to like write off a boat or something ridiculous. I do write off a vehicle, but I don't really take any chances. Nothing, don't do anything crazy. Keep it realistic. And the last tip is definitely get a good accountant. I mean, my specialty is software. I could probably figure out some of this tax stuff, but I don't want to put the hours in. A good accountant knows the rules. They know how much you can get away with. You know what I mean? Oh, they'll tell you, no, don't do that. That's a red flag. Absolutely do not do that. It's not worth it. Maybe you'll get away with it for 2 years, and then you'll regret it in year 3. Or even just telling you, like my accountant, Initially I had all kinds of money in a business checking account, and he's like, the first year the account says, hey, you can get a savings account paying you what, 3%, 2, 3%, whatever, that's linked to your checking account, and you just move the money when as you write checks to move the money over. And I mean, I had like, a lot of money in this account that was earning nothing. I lost, thousands of dollars in interest. Um, so that's what a good accountant will do. They'll guide you in the right direction, and prevent you from making mistakes. And the way to get a good accountant is just, ask your network, try to get referrals. I mean, I wouldn't go to, I wouldn't Google it, or just go to Craigslist or something. Ask around, ask people in your network, who do you recommend? That's how I got my accountant. All right, freedom. So let's see. So this was also a video that doesn't really work. Um, so one of the great aspects of freelancing is that, yes, you are not married to an organization. Um, you do have freedoms. If you're working with a bad client, it doesn't last forever. You can, you know, finish up your project, do what you have to do for this client, and then if it's time for renewal, you just say, yeah, I got another project. I'm sorry, but I have another project to go on to. Versus, say, if you're, some people can get stuck at a bad company for years. And especially for someone like me, not being a super aggressive person, I stayed way too long at different companies. Um, and maybe that's, I'm a Gen X, or maybe that's generational. I know some of the younger people, they won't stick around for a minute. If a company doesn't deliver what they promise, they're out of there like in a week. I mean, that's a little too aggressive. But I know that happened to one of my colleagues. They were promised something and it didn't happen in a month, and they just left. Uh, but yeah, so uh, as a freelancer, you can pick and choose the projects that you're on. So there's a certain amount of freedom. If you don't like something, you're not married to them. Or even if, let's say, you get cut, um, you could be working at a company for 10 years and something goes south and you get laid off. When you're freelancing, if you get cut, big deal. I change clients yearly anyway. So um, yeah. All right. So freedom. Um, let's see some other good aspects. Typically, you're making good money. Uh, I think the rule of thumb is that you should be making, if you're just starting out, this is not true, but if you have experience in the field, you should be making like double the whatever the going rate is, the going like salary rate. Your contracting or freelance rate should be like double it. Just a rule of thumb. It might not be that much. It could be 3 times as much, or it could be maybe 1.5 times, right? But it should be more than a straight salary. Unless, if you're just starting out, then yeah, you might be lower than the salary because you're trying to get experience. Um, but yeah, this little picture here, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but let's see, at the end of 16, I got involved in this crazy project at the end of 2016 where I was just working around the clock. It was nuts. They this company went live too early, and to keep their production going, they had all their consultants working like 80 hours, 100 hours, crazy per week. So I ended up getting a check for that value, for that amount. That's like the biggest check I ever had. But it wasn't fun. I don't know if I'd want to do it again. It's a lot of money, but I had no life. I think I have a tweet there that, yeah, I was in Florida, but it didn't matter because I was indoors literally 16 hours a day or more. Um, for me, I've had the opportunity to travel. That's pretty cool. Um, maybe not Hawaii, but I've been to a couple places in Long Island. I've been to Baltimore, uh, been to Detroit, Indianapolis. Just you get to kind of, if you're in a role where you can travel, you can see parts of the country and then check out what's happening in those areas, which is pretty cool.
Hey,
People are
Glenn, we
doing
have
this
a question in the chat
Oh,
that says,
sure.
do you have client contracts, and how do you decide what you are charging the customer?
So do I have client contracts? So the way I do it, and I think this is pretty common in the SAP world. Pretty much I'll have one client at a time, one client where I'm working 40 hours, 40 plus hours per week. I know some other freelancers, maybe like more web-based type tools, where they might have 5 clients at a time working, one client is 10 hours, another's 5, another's 20. And, they might be juggling several clients at once. In my area, it's pretty much one at a time, but you're basically full time with one client. That's pretty much how it's been working. And the rate, and this is a good question. There's lots of research dedicated to this. Like, how do you know the rate? Typically, when I'm working with a recruiter, they have the rate. Like, there will be a rate that they're offering you, and they get a cut, right? They definitely get a cut out of this. Sometimes they lowball you, and you just kind of know it. You could also ask again. You could ping your network. What's a person with Python? 5 years of Python. What should they be getting? You can ask around and get an idea for what the going rate is. And like, I don't know, I've been doing this for a long time, so I pretty much know what it should be in my area. And there is a supply and demand curve to it as well. If the labor market's super tight, rates will be higher, and if there's lots of people on the street, then the rates will drop a bit. So yeah, supply and demand definitely affects it as well. But yeah, there's no perfect answer to that question. But you might do a 3-month contract at a certain rate, find out that you're being underpaid, and then if they want to renew, you just say, hey, I got to raise my rate. I realize that the market is really paying this much, and I'd like to raise my rate. And if the client is smart, they'll go with it. Okay, so let's see. Hopefully I answered that.
Hang on, Glenn. I didn't realize that was a 2-part question. Because when you said you were an independent, like freelance person, I'm thinking you're doing just independent projects with customers directly. I didn't realize you were like contracting as a consultant to businesses. I guess my question was more geared toward individual projects outside of consulting services. Like, they come directly to you. What are you charging them?
Oh, well, so typically the way I work, usually there is a recruiter or an agency kind of in the middle between me and the end client, and they do get a cut of that rate.
I see.
It's very rare to be able to work directly. I think I've been doing this for 15 years. I think I've done it once where I
Wow.
was able to work directly. And guess what? You get that the margin that the recruiter gets, now you might not get the whole thing. You give them a deal, right? To work
Right.
directly with you, but you're still making more than you would when you're going through a recruiter. But it's kind of hard. I don't know. It's in my experience in SAP world, it is challenging to go direct, because most of these companies, they don't want to deal with 10 different freelancers. They want one agency who can deal with that for them, and they don't have to deal with it, cut 10 checks, all this other stuff. This way they cut one check to agency XYZ, and then XYZ deals with the 10 Glenn Allens.
Right. Okay.
But sometimes it can happen. It can happen. And I think maybe in the web world, like when you're dealing with smaller projects, going direct is probably more likely, because they don't have they're not big enough to work with like an agency, because they only need maybe one person, right? If you only really need one contractor, you can work with them directly.
I just think post-COVID, with all that like stimulus money floating around, a lot of people started small businesses, and they're definitely in need of like media presence and that kind of thing. So small businesses are near and dear to my heart. And I think those are the people I come across most often. They're like, oh, you're in school for coding? Cool. Can you build me a site? No, not yet, but I'm getting there. And those are the opportunities that I keep coming across. And I'm like, well, what do I even ask as a compensation for that kind of thing? I guess that's a conversation to be had with the client. Sorry for the interruption.
Well, no, this is the question that comes up every time I do this talk. That's the question, actually. And just in the freelance world, what should I charge? That
Right.
is a question. And that's actually something you could talk with Max. I mean, probably has Max definitely has a good idea on what a junior developer should be
Mhm.
getting, what
Mhm.
would be fair.
Yeah.
You know, they might, you might go in very, like inexpensively because, you don't have the professional experience. You need the experience. So you
Right.
might work, 25% under the market, just to
Mhm.
get the project. And then the client knows, okay, it's going to take me longer. I'm not, I don't have 10 years of experience doing this. I'm just starting out, but I'm hungry and I want to help you. And I want to build my own portfolio up.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'll find clients that'll work with you too.
And no
Um,
matter what kind of contracting work you're doing, you always have the option of saying, well, am I going to charge per hour or am I going to charge per project, right? For
Great.
a flat rate.
Mhm.
And so that's another thing to consider, right? Because as someone more junior, it's obviously going to take you more hours, but they're getting it for less.
Right.
Less of an hourly rate. So that's another thing to factor into it. Some people may be more likely to take a flat project rate with a junior developer because they're saying, well, we don't
Mm.
care if it takes you 3 weeks to get it done instead of 1 week, because we're paying you the same amount either way.
Right.
And that can lower the stress level throughout the project of knowing, all right, it's taking me a little bit more time to get this done, but at least the client isn't, paying for that quite literally. But then it also creates more stress on you to say, hey, can I scope this project correctly? Can I estimate out all the work that it's going to take for me to do, everything I've got to learn to get that project done, all of that stuff. So unfortunately, there's no one single answer for that. And there is definitely, it's not quite the same in terms of like working with a recruiter in the SAP world. But there are definitely agencies that will hire and say, hey, instead of an entrepreneur who has to deal with the client directly and the marketing to find new clients and all of the work that you have to do as a freelancer, you could work at an agency where you've got other people working with you, you've got
mhm.
teammates, and you've got designers and marketers, and everything is kind of share because you're working as an agency together. So there are lots of different ways to think about contract work and figuring out your pricing.
And
Definitely
I
a
I
whole
would
new
be
world.
careful about fixed price. So I always do rate plus expenses. So
Ooh.
fixed price would be like someone say, I want this website to do this, this, and this, and I'll pay you 10 G's for the whole thing. Now it could take you 1,000 hours. I don't, I mean, so you're almost better off kind of like what Max said is scoping it out, coming up with an estimate. And this is true in being an employee too. I mean, everyone does estimates, whether you're freelancing or as an employee,
Yeah.
and trying to, and then based on that, you'll know how much it's going to cost. And these are not always perfect either. Estimates are just that. You could be off by 20%, either way. So yeah, I would say try to stay away from fixed price because if the project goes nuclear, you're not getting any more money. I mean, but that's something we can.
Unless you have a hell of a contract, Glenn.
Uh, okay, all right, true. If you know it's going to take you 3 hours, and I don't know,
I'm
maybe,
putting
but
it in the fine print. It's right there, sir. You signed off on it.
and then you got to be a little careful too. You don't want to, let somebody think they got ripped off either. So that might not be worthwhile either, right? You might have years of a relationship with a company, so you
Yeah.
kind of want to be fair too. Although that's not going to happen too much. All right, let me continue on here. That's good,
Thank
good,
you.
good topic for discussion.
Thank you
So
so much.
you're very welcome. Let's see. Yeah. Depending on the client, you can maybe get some perks. So for example, I worked at a company that was in eyewear, and the company called VSP, and I was invited to um, twice a year. They would sell these designer frames for employees. Sometimes they let contractors in, but I got lucky. I got invited, and you could buy these designer frames at like 90% off, like Ferragamo and Nine West and all these really fancy frames, and you get like steep discounts. That's just an idea of a potential perk. And lastly, I said you're working with the best. when you're working with other consultants and other freelancers. So it's a great way to learn. You can, I've been working with SAP for a long, long time, and you think you know it all, and then you're working with somebody else, and they show you another way of doing something. You're like, oh my God, this is how can that happen? But that's awesome when that can happen. So it's great to be able to learn from other consultants. All right, let's see. All right, so here's some negative aspects. This is more pre-COVID. I haven't really traveled much since COVID. I've pretty much been a remote person. But people they do travel. If you are a traveling consultant and you're away from home, you need a strong partner. It's going to be tough if your wife or husband is calling you every day, every hour with some problem. So you need to have a partner that could handle you being away. And then it is hard to maintain relationships. If you're on the road, Monday through Thursday, you really only have weekend relationships. So that could be tricky. On the tax side, you do have to pay twice the Social Security. When you're working for an employer, they pay half. They pay whatever, 7%, and then you pay 7%. When you're self-employed, you pay the whole thing. Although you do get to write it off later on. That definitely is not good. Let's see. The other negative thing, sometimes companies have freelancers around, so you can be the scapegoat. If something goes wrong, they don't want to get fired, so the freelancer could potentially get blamed. This doesn't happen a lot, but I've seen it. It can happen. And I've seen companies too where they play people off of each other. Like they'll have a competition among freelancers, and then they'll keep one and let the other one go. So creating sort of this competition, which I don't think is very healthy, but this can happen. I had this little note about H-1B visas. I've had this talk for quite a while. That has settled down a bit. H-1B visa is a way for companies to hire foreign folks, but it was a program that was just very much abused. Preference is supposed to go to U.S. citizens, and there should be a prevailing wage. There shouldn't be a lower rate for the H-1B people, but routinely there always was. I think there's still some abuse, but this has improved a lot. Let's see. Okay. So, things can be good. It's cyclical. Things can be good, things can be bad. Right now I'm on a pretty good run. I've been working steadily for several years, so I'm, kicking some pretty good butt. However, there have been times where I've been out of work for a year. I didn't work for a year. Like I think 2015 or something like that. I didn't work. It was just a bad economy and it was just rough. So here I just have a picture of the Medicaid card. I was on Medicaid. You qualify for Medicaid when you don't work. When your income is low, you qualify. It doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank. It's based on income. So actually, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really proud of this. I don't want to say I'm ashamed, but this can happen. I mean, this can happen to the best of people where you just don't work. I don't know. It's just things don't go your way, and you're out of work for a long time. And I'm of the opinion, when times are good, I'm paying some crazy taxes. I'm paying a lot of money in taxes. So when things are bad, I'm gonna take every benefit that I'm entitled to. Absolutely. And that year I qualified for Medicaid, and man, Medicaid's awesome. Right now I'm paying crazy money for horrible insurance, like almost no coverage for a lot of money, and Medicaid paid for everything. But if you could stay off of it, I would. But the lesson here is that as a freelancer, there's no guarantee, right? When you're employed, you do have that steady paycheck. Again, there's no guarantee anywhere. As we've seen, there's been lots of layoffs. Companies were hiring like crazy, like I don't know, 2 years ago, and now they're dumping them. So even as an employee, there's no guarantee, but freelancing is a little bit riskier. All right. Let's see. Oh yeah. So here's some more lessons. So you're responsible for paying your taxes. You know, when you're working for an employer, they take the taxes out for you. You don't have to worry about it. As a freelancer, you have to pay, quarterly. And you don't want to be late and you don't want to be low. You want to pay Uncle Sam the right amount of money, Uncle Sam and New York State what they're due. Um, some people can't handle, if you're making good money, some people can't handle it. You go buying everything, buying your, you know, new car, your Cadillac, whatever it is, and then you don't have money left over to pay your taxes and your bills. So you definitely want to save your money and pay these things as they come due. The second bullet point, so this is more for senior folks. Um, I had a mentor once tell me, hey, never say you don't know. Um, because companies aren't paying you, they're not paying you $100 an hour to not know, right? They want you to know. But of course, you're not, no one's ever going to know everything. But just that phrase of saying I don't know it just doesn't sound good. So there's other ways of saying you don't know without saying you don't know. So you could say, well, let me look into this. Let me get back to you. I don't have the answer on the top of my head, but let me delve into the code and I'll get back to you this afternoon. Which sounds a lot better than just saying, I don't know. What do I know? I don't, it just sounds like a weakness. Now, since you folks, you're more junior level, it is more okay to say I don't know, because you are, junior level. You don't have the senior experience. You're not going to know. But that's just a tip for, when you do get your 5-10 years of experience. Um, you want to just say, yeah, let me look into that. I'll do some research and get back to you. It sounds a lot better. Um, let's see real quickly. Stay true to yourself. Um, I'm not a big fan of Upwork. Upwork is a freelance site, and one of the problems with them is their rates are just low. There's a lot of foreign talent on there that work for like nothing, work for peanuts. So it's hard to get a good project on Upwork. And the one experience I did have was weird, really weird. This company, I don't know this. So this one consulting company, they had a senior SAP person that they promised one of their clients was going to be around, and then that person dropped out, and they wanted me to like impersonate this person on a phone call. Since I had senior experience, I could probably pull it off. And I think this was actually during a time where I wasn't working, so I was sort of tempted maybe to do this, but it was just too creepy. I mean, you have to have. I mean, freelancing, full-time employee, whatever you are, you do need to have some principles and ethics in the way you conduct yourself. So if anyone, is asking you to do something, fudge test results, or like lie or something, you can't do it. You just got, because inevitably it's going to bite you in the butt. It's not going to work. You're better off just feeling good about yourself, being able to sleep at night, being honest. I mean, even if there's a deadline or something, and a client is not happy, you're better off just saying, hey, we're here, we're here. At the first sign of trouble, the first sign of a problem, raise it immediately. Hey, oh man, I estimated this, and now that I'm getting into it, I see this problem. It's going to take another week to do this. You know, and instead of just saying, "Oh yeah, we got it, we got it, we got it," and then at the deadline, "Oh yeah, it's not working." The earlier you can tell a client that there's a problem, the better it's going to be. And I think we know this from just all aspects of life. Uh, Delaying and putting it off because you're afraid to disappoint somebody, you're 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 so much better off bringing it up right away, getting it out there, being honest, transparent, getting right at there immediately. It's the best way. I mean, the client still might be upset, but they won't be as upset if you tell them at the last minute when they're expecting it. Yeah. I mean, just think about, even when like if you're getting your car worked on, you show up to get your car and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, there's a problem," versus they call you right away and say, "Yeah, this thing is not working. It's going to take another like 3 days." you know, it's you're still going to be upset, but it's going to be more easier to digest. All right, I don't want to beat that to death. All right. So that's the talk I have. This is you could, you know, ask me any question you want about, you know, professional software development, freelancing, whatever. This is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me. You know, if you have a question later on. I really believe, as a senior person, it's part of my duty, my responsibility as a senior software professional, that we do need to mentor the people coming up. I think that we need talent. We need you. We need you, the people that are in this program getting these skills. We absolutely need you. There's going to be a war for talent coming up. You know, it's going to be the US versus the rest of the world. I mean, maybe it sounds weird. Maybe right now, maybe the market's a little off, but guaranteed the market comes back, and we're going to need every single software person we can get our hands on. So yeah, if you have questions, I'm more than happy to mentor. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You know, I don't know, I have a decent network. Try to connect you with a job if possible. So yeah, any questions?
In the chat, Palash asks, as beginners, how do we know we're ready? What are some parameters to measure ourselves against?
I would say, you know what? No one's ever really ready, right? I think you have to go for it as soon as you can. Like, I think, well, yeah, Natasha was saying that she had clients finding out that she's in coding. Oh, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? I would, you know, I would say, hey, let me have your contact information. All right, I just started doing this class, but you know what? I'm going to need a project for, you know, my capstone. I'm going to need to build a portfolio. You know, let's talk. Let me have your contact information, and you know, find out what kind of project, what you're interested in. Maybe I could send you to someone else. Maybe there's a couple of people that I know that are doing software development. I could refer you to them, and then maybe that'll come back to you. So no one's ever really ready. I mean, even think about like people who get a bachelor's in computer science. You know, you get a bachelor's in computer science, 22 years old. You don't really know that much. I mean, you know, you get a job, and then they train you the way they want you to do a job. You know, I don't, yeah, and I know Max will back me up on this. No one comes out of college and doesn't need any mentoring or any training at all. You just have the bare minimum to start. So yeah, I would say, you know, go for it. You know, be honest. But yeah, talk to potential clients, talk to employers. Absolutely.
And I think on Glenn's previous slide, it's like there are going to be things that come up, right? And I think the most important part, in my opinion, for doing contracting work is you have to over communicate, right? Because it's so natural to find a deficiency, right? Find something that's going to take a little bit longer for you and think, oh, this is only taking longer because I'm a junior developer. So I'm going to hide that from the client, or I'm going to shut down on communication and I'm just going to work on it. And then it just snowballs, right? Because you're getting further and further behind, and you're causing more and more stress. When if you just said to that client, hey, this is, you know, I scoped this a little wrong, or I'm still getting started here. Do you mind giving me an extra day or two to work on this, or an extra week to work on it? 99% of the time, clients are going to say, well, thank you for that communication. I appreciate being in the loop. Just keep working on it, right? And you don't want to oversell yourself. You're not coming in and saying, hey, I'm a senior developer with decades of experience, right? Like, they know your experience level. They know they're probably getting a better deal working with you. And worst case scenario is the project doesn't end up working out. And sometimes, you know, I've built a site for a client before, and they said, hey, you know, I really love this site, but my business partner is actually responsible for making the decisions.
Yeah.
And they don't want to use the site. And I said, okay, no problem. Do you mind if I put it on my portfolio anyway? And they said, yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Right. You invested the time into building that site and it looks great. Feel free to put that on your portfolio. So even though that wasn't a source of income, that was still a worthwhile project to do. So I agree with Glenn. You just got to go out, you got to do it. Maybe it makes sense to wait until the end of the boot camp because there are only so many hours in the day. But at the same time, it is important to just say yes to opportunities because that's been my entire career of things falling in my lap and me jumping on them and pushing them forward.
And
Eva asked, oh, go ahead,
I
Don.
will, and just to add to that, uh, communicating about maybe things not going well. That's also true when you're an employee. When you're talking to your boss, if at the first sign of any challenge or trouble, raise it to your boss. Same thing, same kind of, you don't want your boss to be surprised, right? So okay, go ahead.
Couple other questions here in the chat. Eva asked the question, are there any job boards you can recommend for finding freelance jobs?
So let's see. Well, I think Indeed, right? Probably the typical ones. I know that Dice, I used to use Dice a long time ago, but Dice has seemed to just have only the really like bad contracts now, like the low paying ones that it's mostly maybe foreign folks. But you can always check them out. I mean, check out Monster, Dice, Indeed. I'm not a fan of Upwork, like for what I mentioned before. But you can look at, it's okay to look at it, check it out. I've been doing this for so long now that I'm basically on a million lists of recruiters. So when opportunities come up, I just get an email. But yeah, there's no secret website for this stuff.
Yeah, and it is all networking, right? I think word of mouth is one of the best ways of getting contracts. And once you get on these lists or once you do good work for one person, I have found, especially in the central New York area, if you do good work for one business owner, that business owner knows 10 other business owners that also need websites. So it is very, very important to network. That's why we take time out off at Open Hack. That's why Glenn is at Open Hack all the time and Community Cup and all of those events, because it is very, very important. Even if you're working a job, they say ABC, always be closing, because even while you're working on a job, when that job ends, you now need another job to go to. And sometimes contracting or working through negotiations or doing that process takes a very long time. So it's important to juggle your time if you're considering doing anything freelance of, hey, I'm working on this and this is a good gig now, but this gig is going to end at some point and I need the next thing to go on to.
And let me just share this little thing since you're talking about networking. And it doesn't always have to be like at these formal events. I was doing a charity bike ride on Saturday for Meals on Wheels, where it was kind of like a scavenger hunt. So one of the places was Myers Creek, which is off the Inner Harbor. And so I was just having a beer with my cycling buddy, and I just struck up a conversation with a couple that was next to us. And this guy was telling me about this new company that a bunch of ex SRC people joined, and he's starting there Monday. And he's like, "Yeah, they're hiring." I was like, "Oh, okay." I connected with him on LinkedIn, and I'm going to share with Kyle, and so you never know. Always, maybe ABN, always be networking, right?
We have two other questions here for you. Do you still get paid when they don't like the end result?
So since I am, like I said, I'm like time plus expenses. So I get paid. Yeah, I get paid no matter what. When you're consulting and freelancing, basically you're going to submit your time to somebody. There's a manager or somebody will be like accepting your time. and they have to approve that time to make sure you get paid. And that could also be identified in your contract that you're gonna, you don't get paid like at the very end. I mean, maybe a fixed price would be like that. But that's just nuts. How can how can you work and not get paid, right? You got to get something to keep you going. So yeah, I would work it out in the contract that you're going to get paid periodically or at milestones, or like I get paid monthly. My hours get approved on a weekly basis, and then I'll submit an invoice at the end of the month, and I'm supposed to get paid within 30 days. So yeah, all that's worked out ahead of time.
And again, that goes back to, well, if they're not happy with it, can you make them happy with it? Providing feedback and soliciting that is all part of contracting and communications, right? And so it's not just, oh, they're not happy with it, all right, we'll cut off the contract and call it a day. Oftentimes and this is often written into the contracting on the web development side, is, well, there's revisions and sometimes an ongoing maintenance contract as well. So it depends on the nature of the job. Oftentimes it is hourly, but that hourly, the company will recognize that investing another 5 hours into you fixing it is going to be a whole heck of a lot cheaper than someone building it from scratch the way they want it. So oftentimes you have revision cycles and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think any project that you're on, you're going to want to have periodical reviews, right? It should never be where, you're working on something for 6 months, no one looks at it, and at the end of the six months, you show them what you have. That should never happen. And there should be like, monthly, at least monthly, look at what we have now. Is this the right way? There should not be a surprise. And I usually, well, not all clients are great, right? So you might, I would say it's ultimately like the freelancer's responsibility to make sure that you're on the right track and check with them. There should not be any surprises where I don't like this at the end of 3 months. I've never had that happen. I mean, there's been different varying levels of success, but there shouldn't be any surprises.
And I just want to clarify on that. I was learning a whole new framework at the time. It was a tool that I'd never used in WordPress. And so that's why I didn't get paid for that gig. Is normally you don't start work on the contract other than maybe a proposal, unless you have a signed contract agreeing to get paid. This happened to be a tool that I was learning, and I thought, oh, this is a good business to kind of model it after. So that's the only reason I didn't get paid on that. Was it was a side project for me, right? And I ended up making a business out of that and making other websites for people. But now I had that initial project to put on my portfolio. Even though I wasn't paid for it, I still was more confident of going out and selling those services because I had played around with it and built something real with it. So you shouldn't be investing a significant amount of time unless you have a signed contract agreeing to pay you, and a review cycle and all of that stuff. Couple more questions for you, Glenn, if you have a second.
Yeah.
Palash asks, do you use or recommend any questionnaires to get basic client questions out of the way?
I don't. I mean, the way my work goes is usually there's already a project in mind. Like there's a requisition. We need an SAP person with 10 years of experience, because we know we have this amount of work to do. So in my situation, I usually don't encounter something like that. So I think that's more like, yeah, if you're like doing a project from scratch and you're trying to get requirements. I have not done that, but it sounds like maybe a good way to go, right, Max? I think that's the direction they're going in.
Yeah, and I think over time you start developing your own questionnaires. A lot of it is just client meetings. Never underestimate the number of hours of meetings and make sure that you're always billing for those meetings. But over time, you also get better at realizing that you end up asking this client this question every single contract, and because of that, you get better at capturing that in a form, right? And like Glenn was saying, things like saying, hey, how often do you want to have a weekly standing meeting to touch base, or, biweekly, or whatever it is? That ends up being a very good question to ask. Or the things on web design that are somehow always very painful and very slow, of, can I get a copy of your logo? And they provide it to you in the lowest resolution possible that looks like it was made on a 1980s computer. And you're like, all right, I need something more high resolution than this. Or over time, you develop those questions, but it depends on the work. If you're doing completely custom work, with a full stack application, it just so depends on the client, that over time you get better at developing those questionnaires or a list of questions to run through in a meeting.
Yeah, I would say too, even an employer situation, um, typically they might have a project already scoped out, and they'll have like a specification meeting with you, and they'll go through the spec with you, and then you can ask questions and maybe come up with an estimate at that point. Like the current client situation I'm in right now, that's how we do a lot of things. There's some kind of a task, a project, a request, and the like the functional person, the functional expert, the business person will sit down with me and go over it. And then I can ask questions or bring up issues that I could see from a technical perspective, and then we go from there. So that's in a more sophisticated kind of modern situation. If you're walking into Meals on Wheels, and they want you to, you're just sitting with the executive director, and they want this website, that, yeah, there's a whole class on that, right? Just, asking questions, coming up with like a document, coming up with a requirements document, and getting a sign off. Yeah.
I've got two more questions for you, and then we will let you go. One question from Natasha: what is your preferred invoice or billing system?
So I keep it simple. I just I just use an Excel spreadsheet. And I got like an invoice template 10 years ago from Excel, and that's all I do. I just put the dates and the hours in there, and email it, submit it by email to the agency, and that's it.
Believe it or not, I completely agree with you. I think people way overcomplicate invoicing. They set up these fancy applications that can do a gazillion things, and then they spend more time figuring out how to load up their invoice than they do actually doing the work. So it's important to a lot of people recommend QuickBooks. QuickBooks is great for if you're running a true small business with a couple of employees, if you have to track a lot of finances, an LLC somewhat lessens the accounting burden that you have. If you end up becoming an S Corp or C Corp, there's a lot more balancing of books that you need to do. But until you hit that level, I actually find Excel is 9 times out of 10 a better route to go than QuickBooks, only because you have to learn 100% of QuickBooks to use 10% of it. And that's why I'm not a big QuickBooks fan. But keeping track of financial records, I'm not downplaying the importance of that. Tracking expenses, making sure you know where your money is going, all of that is also very important.
So even for my accounting, I same thing. I use a spreadsheet. I took an accounting class in college, so I have some of those skills. And I just keep a journal on a spreadsheet, keeping track of expenses and all that stuff, and like a ledger. And then I just give the final numbers to my accountant, in April. So yeah, you don't really need to use QuickBooks until you're a big shot.
Glenn, that was a great plan till you got to the accountant part. Wonderful. Everybody's got one.
Well, I don't have a bookkeeper. I do my own books, but I have the accountant that signs off on the final numbers.
Thank you.
And the last question I have for you from Palash: Generalist versus specialist. What works better in freelancing in your experience? A master of a couple skills or a freelancer who can wear different hats and switch between them efficiently?
So I think that's more preference. You could be very successful going either way. The downside to maybe being a super specialist is that if that specialty falls out of favor, then you're done. You know, I mean, people might love you in rare corners of the earth kind of thing that need that skill. But if it goes away, you're kind of like done. You got to start over. So a more generalist will always have work to do. The super specialist though could make some pretty good money. You know, if you're one of 50 people in the world that can do one thing, then you're going to get paid really well to do it. But then, yeah, maybe you're not working all the time. So the generalist will be more employable. But that's I would say is preference. I think I'm kind of like a mix. I mean, I'm pretty specialized in SAP, but I can do other things. Yeah, it's kind of similar to the, well, do I go the management route or do I go the super tech route? Because, you know, maybe you can make more money on the management route. Maybe there's more joy in, like, you know, leading a project and helping other developers meet their goals. Then you got to deal with personal problems though, which a lot of people don't want to deal with. You know, managers, talk to Jay Balunas about being a manager, right? Like you got, you know, are you good with people? Whatever. Technical route, you just want to be challenged technically all the time and have, you know, having awesome problems to solve. I know I kind of expanded on that a little bit, but that's all personal preference.
And I agree, because and some of it is company preference as well, right? So at our startup, we chose to hire only full stack developers. So that's more generalist, right? Because whenever a feature came up, I wanted to be able to pick any one of my employees and hand them the task and know that they could accomplish it, whether it was a big interface and only a little bit on the back end in the database, or whether it was a huge database task and only a little bit on the front end. Because they were full stack, they were able to do that whole task. But eventually, over time, we got to the point of saying we really need someone who is good at design and front end, and we don't really care if they can do any of the back end work. We have so much of that design and front end work. We just need to hire the specialist to focus on that. And when we did, it was a great productivity boost for the whole team, because we had that specialist there. So oftentimes you will find at larger companies, they tend to specialize a little bit more, because they have the headcount, right? They have the number of employees spread out that they can specialize in different things and be efficient. But it does really depend on the company, and it depends on you as an individual. I love being in the entrepreneurial space. I love being at a couple person company where it's just, I don't care who knows how to do this or who doesn't know how to do this. We're going to learn, we're going to get it done. You know, I'll figure it out. We can all wear different hats and approach that. Some people may find that their imposter syndrome is a little too fierce to battle there. And what they want to do is do a deep dive and become a specialist and really become an expert in that. And sure, it might be a little bit harder to find a role to do that, but when they do find it, they're probably going to be compensated pretty well for it, and they're going to enjoy doing it because they invested all the time into learning it and applying it on the job. So
yeah, I would say don't do it for the money. Don't be like, well, I want to be a specialist in this because I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to, you know, I'll be getting $300 an hour. But if you don't like it, you know, do it if you like it. Like if it's something you really like, getting really into the weeds on a certain thing, do it. But if it's just for the money, it won't be that fulfilling. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great advice. Well, Glenn, thank you so much for coming in and presenting all this information and answering all the questions. Any final thoughts?
I usually close with this, that I know this is a very challenging course that you folks have chosen, And I just want to reinforce that you are making the right decision. This is a great field to be in. We hire everybody. We don't care what you look like, where you came from, what you did. If you've got the skills, if you've got the business acumen, the communication skills, if you're honest, we want you. So congratulations on choosing this field, and good luck with the rest of the semester.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
You're welcome. Cheers. I'm just gonna hang out for a minute and then, yeah,
Absolutely.
I'll go on mute.
So we are going to dive back into React. I know we dropped you in the deep end with open hack of only 2 days of React, pushing the baby birds out of the nest with the homework, and then turning around and saying, all right, go networking, go talk about React and how you guys are doing. Oh, Jen, quiet, you're stuck with me now, sorry. So we are going to keep it going. The good news is we are only learning one new concept tonight. So that means everything we're doing tonight is a review on the terminal. It's going to be a review on getting a React project started from scratch. It is going to be a translation of something we've already built. We are going to dive into the Owen Wilson API again and rebuild what we built the first time, this time in React. And then we're going to get to even more fun. We're going to add some features into it and see how easy it is to add some additional features. If we have time at the end of class, I don't think we will, but if we do, we will get the chat app set up, and then that will be the project for the rest of the week of learning how to move components into separate files. We're going to get more practice with state, and we're going to build out a whole interface kind of for the first time where we can see an app start to form and all of that good stuff. With all of that said, before we dive into that, does anyone have any outstanding questions?
So Doug wanted me to show you this error message we got today working in terminal on the Yeet project.
Okay.
I don't know. Share screen. Is this yours or mine? I think this one is yours. Nope, this is mine.
Nope, that's yours.
Yeah. So I don't know what this is, but
that is normal, and I'm glad you're showing it. There is some drama going on in the React community right now about whether or not Create React App is deprecated or not, or depreciated. Technically two different words, but they mean the same thing, which is dumb. Welcome to English. What's going on right now is Create React App's future is kind of up in the air. And so one of the major dependencies of React, which is called Babel, is saying that you shouldn't be using Create React App anymore, and they're throwing some shade at you and at the Create React developers because they are in favor of this newer version. So this is completely safe to ignore. Create React App is not, in fact, actually not maintained anymore. It still is. Maybe down the road, we will be changing the way that we start React apps from scratch. But basically what they're warning you is, hey, Create React App is a little questionable right now. This is not going to impact your capstones, your projects, any of that. It is completely safe. We will all be getting this yellow message at some point. Completely fine to ignore it.
okay. Because they wanted us to put this string thing in there, and then there was like no value for it. So I was like, I don't know. I don't know.
Nope, you're fine. Just those yellow ones you can completely ignore for now.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions before we dive on in?
So I had a question.
Yeah.
So from now on, if we want to create a project, should we start the Create React App, or we should look into more?
You can use Create React App for now. The newer alternative is called Vite. I've no idea if it is if I'm pronouncing it right. It's VITE. And that is like Create React App, except a little bit more powerful. It gives you some options when you're creating the project. and allows you to create multiple different kinds of projects. So you can use it with Next.js, you can use it, I believe, with Angular, a couple other project types. So that's probably what we'll be switching over to next cohort. Of course, they started throwing shade on Create React App like a week before we started learning React. So VITE is the name of the newer one that you can check out if you want, but Create React App is totally fine to use for now.
And one more thing. So before we used to create like a file and then create index and CSS, and we would create the whole website in there. So should we stop doing that and do in React only?
Yes, for React projects, you definitely want to use Create React App. And that's a very good question. Here's why. Because React doesn't exist on its own. It uses a dependency called Webpack in order to take all the JSX code that we're writing and convert it into vanilla JavaScript that the browser can run. That's why we can't just open up app.js and see it in the browser. We need to run npm start, right? And so what Create React App is doing for us is not only installing React and creating all the files, it's installing all of the dependencies of React that it takes in order for us to do development. So we definitely don't want to start those files from scratch. If we are creating a blank React app, we definitely want to do it using Create React App or Vite or however you pronounce it, which is going to be the future of creating a project from scratch. But it is very rare that we want to create those files manually when we're working with React. The only exception to that is when we're working with day 2, day 3, day 4, where we just kind of want to start with the previous day's code and keep going, right? That won't be done in a production workflow, in a workflow when you're working on it at work. We just follow those day flows so that you can compare day 1 code to day 2 code and kind of see as it evolves over time. But deleting out the node modules, duplicating the folder, and running npm install is just a workflow that we do in class. It will not be a workflow that you will likely use outside in your professional careers.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and dive on in. Going to share my screen. Give me a second to get. Now you can get discombobulated. Can you get combobulated? Is that a thing? All right, here we go. So I am going to start out by going to my terminal. I think there's a fair amount of confusion on how do I create a React app. Rain just asked, is anyone else's audio going in and out? Everyone can hear me all right? Okay. So first things first, the most important part of the terminal is PWD. You are always in a working directory when you are in the terminal. PWD, print working directory, that shows us what folder we are currently in. What directory are we working in? Right now, I am in the users hack upstate folder. If I go to my Finder and pull up the home folder, this is the folder that I am currently in when I open the terminal for the first time. By the way I got to this, Command space, I typed in terminal and I hit enter, and that's what popped this window open. This terminal and the terminal in VS Code, exactly the same thing. The only thing with VS Code is that when we open an integrated terminal, it's going to open in whatever folder we have open in VS Code. We don't have that luxury in this Mac terminal. So what we need to do is practice navigating around to get to the right spot. So I want to get to my desktop, but I don't know, is my desktop in this folder or not? So I'm going to type in ls, which stands for list, and it's going to show me all of the folders in my current directory. I want to go to my desktop. So I'm going to cd change directory to my desktop. I am then going to ls again, and now I see all of the different files on my desktop. I want to go down into my C5 my code. So I type in C5 and I hit tab and it auto completes it and drops in my file path. I am then going to ls again, and I don't have a week 14 directory. So I could cheat. I could go to my desktop, I could go to my code, and I could make my week 14 right here. But we're going to do it in the terminal. So I'm going to mkdir W14 and hit enter. Then you would think I'm now in week 14. I am not. Look what happened. I created week 14, but if I pwd, I'm still in my code folder. I created it, but I didn't change. I didn't open myself into it. So I'm going to cd into my week 14. And now if I pwd again, pwd isn't doing anything. All it's doing is telling me, hey, because you're in the terminal, because I can't visually show you this, when you run pwd, I'm going to print out where you currently are. So now I'm down in my week 14. I'm going to do one more mkdir, and I'm going to make my day 1. And then I'm going to cd down into my day 1. Now, if all of that worked, there are 2 things you should do to check. You should run pwd and make sure that you're in your desktop, my code, week 14, day 1 folder. Check 1. Check 2, because we're new to the terminal, we want to confirm that all of that actually worked. So we're going to go back to the C5 my code. We're going to go to week 14, and we're going to make sure there is a day 1 folder there. cd, pwd, mkdir. Those are the 3 commands that we've been using.
Question.
Yes.
Does it matter if we do it in this terminal or the integrated terminal in VS Code?
Doing it in the integrated terminal is totally fine as long as you are in the same directories. Then doing it in the integrated terminal is totally fine. Absolutely no difference.
Thank you.
Max, why am I getting something that tells me there's no such file or directory for C5 my code when I'm looking right at it?
Do you have a space in your my code name?
No, it's C5 dash my code.
Change share your screen. Let's take a look.
I made the week 14, but I did it the other way because yeah.
It's fine. Share your screen. Let's take a look.
I thought I shared it. Screen sharing has failed to start. Please try again later.
Oh, that's one of my favorite error messages
No,
because
it's
there's
not
no
fine.
easy way to fix it. Was that at the beginning of this cohort or the end of the last one where Zoom was doing that all the time? Try and leave the meeting, quit Zoom entirely. So like hit Command Q to close it. Don't just close the window. Come back into the Zoom meeting. Hopefully you can share your screen then.
All right, I'll be back.
Goggin, go ahead.
So I had a question about like all the projects we did before and some of my own projects.
Yep.
How do I convert them to React?
We're going to cover that concept probably next week. We want to kind of get your feet pretty wet with React and understanding the concepts. And then we are going to practice that. But we will kind of answer that a little bit tonight with Owen Wilson, because we're going to see how we make those API calls, how they kind of connect in. But next week, I have an entire class dedicated to how do we convert things over. We haven't learned how to manage components in multiple files yet. We've done everything in app.js. We're going to do that for Owen Wilson tonight. But starting tomorrow, we'll be on the chat project. We'll learn how to put things in different files and how to set up routing as well. So we don't have quite enough to answer that question yet, but that is certainly on the curriculum to get to.
Thank you.
All right, Jen, give it a go. See if you are cursed tonight. Oh, it worked. Okay, cool. All right, can you bring your terminal window over? And if you're talking to us, you're on mute.
Of course I am.
You shared your Finder desktop window, not your terminal. So if you can bring the terminal, just or restart the share, either one's fine.
Yeah, I think I turned my terminal off.
Okay, just hit Command Space to open up your terminal and type in TER and hit enter. Okay, there we go. Okay, so first things first, I always like to know where I'm at. So I'm going to type in PWD and hit enter. And that says you are in your home folder. So you're going to CD space into your desktop with a capital D. And to prove that worked, we can either say ls to list out all of your desktop files, or we could do PWD and see the desktop path. So your my code is there, so you should be able to CD space C5 and hit tab, and it will auto-complete the my code for you. So you can hit enter, and now you're down in my code, so you can CD into your W14. And you can mkdir space D1. mkdir are all one word. Yep. And now you see your day one is there. So one last CD into day one, and you'll be all caught up. Good.
Oh,
Any
thank you.
questions?
Nope.
Cool. All right. Feeling the terminal's a little less scary now that we know how to move around. One last trick to show you. Doing all of this work is a pain in the butt, right? So once someone showed me this, I was so mad that they didn't show me it before. I can drag and drop a file path into this. So if I really want to quickly get to this folder called Flicks, I can hit CD space. You don't have to follow me on this, just showing you an example. Grab this Flicks folder, and it's really, really important that I put that space after the CD before I drag my path in. If I don't, it doesn't know, hey, I'm trying to change my directory. It thinks I'm sending it one really long command. So CD, and then you have to do the space. Then you can grab any folder in Finder, drag and drop it into the terminal. This works in VS Code too, and hit enter. Now, when I run my PWD, you can see it changed me to that folder on my desktop. So one more time, CD space, and then I want to go into my code, my week 14, my day one. I drag and drop that in. I hit enter on that. And now when I PWD again, you can see I'm back in my day one folder. Okay, now for the React stuff. I'm going to npx, x for execute, node package executor, create React app. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this wow, because it's Owen Wilson's wow API. So I'm going to hit enter on that. I'm going to give it a minute to think. This will run a little bit quicker than it did last time we did this because React's already installed. So it should go much faster. If it does ask you if you want to install something, you can hit the Y button. You might have to hit enter. But for the most part, this should go a little bit faster.
All right. I will do it and I missed something. What I miss?
npx create React app with dashes in between it, and then a space and the word wow. Okay. Once we get to happy hacking, we are ready to switch over to VS Code. Don't panic if you're not there yet. We know how to do this step already. We take our wow folder, not the day one folder, the wow folder, and we drag that into VS Code, or we open it in VS Code. Whatever you are more comfortable with is totally fine. So I get into VS Code. I right click on any of the files over here in wow, and I hit open in integrated terminal. Once I have integrated terminal open, I can npm start and I am good to go. npm start is going to open me up into the spinning React logo and give us that warning message that Natasha was showing us. That warning message is okay, just open source developers getting gossipy and throwing some shade around.
Max,
We'll
what's
deal
the
with that at some
index
point.
create stuff again?
Yep, I'm going to put it in chat. It's npx.
Thanks.
Oh, Kenny beat me to it, except it's not npc, which my autocorrect kept doing. It's npx create React app. npx, x for execute, space create React app. That's the command that's going to create all of our files, install everything, a space, and then the name of the project. It is okay to do that all in terminal. In fact, during class, I run everything in the integrated terminal, but at work, I actually like having my code separate from my terminal window. So I actually run all of my terminals separate from VS Code, and then my code stays in a separate window. So either one is totally fine. They do the exact same thing. It is, if you are starting a React app from scratch, it is always, always, always better to create it this way than it is to duplicate an existing project.
Thanks for clarifying, because I remember I opened the terminal one time and it was like the wrong terminal and it was in the main computer system and not in the VS file. So thanks for clarifying.
Either one is fine to use. The only thing with the computer level one is you're always in a directory, right? And even in the VS Code one, you're always in a directory. That's why you're constantly running pwd to make sure that your working directory is the one that you expect it to be.
Understood. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions?
I did. I missed what you put in the terminal at the bottom of VS Code.
npm, M as in manager, space, start, and enter.
Thank you.
All right, we good? Anyone need another minute? We're almost at break time. We're going to just clean out one more file and then we will go on break. I'm going to open up the SRC folder. I'm going to head to app.js and I'm going to delete this entire header element. So leave the div, but everything, the header tag included, we are going to delete out. Now there's one other file we need to delete out. Again, don't delete the div, just delete the header inside the div. The other file that we need to clear out is our app.css. Has a bunch of stuff in here. It's center aligning our text. It's being a pain in the butt. I don't want any of this. So I hit Command A and I clear out the contents of that file. Go back to my app.js. There's one other thing we can clear out. Because we're not using this logo, the compiler, right, which is converting our JSX code, our React code, into JavaScript that our browser can run, it's warning us and it's saying, hey, we're using logo, but we're importing it, but we're never using it. So we can just take that import out here, go ahead and save that, and you should be back to compiled successfully in your terminal. I will stick around for a minute. You will probably have you should have a white screen in your browser. That is totally okay. If you do, go on break, be back at 7:25. Otherwise, raise your hand and I can help you before I go on break.
I just got a quick question. What did you delete in your CSS? I was
Everything,
catching. Oh, okay. I was catching up and I didn't see that
not a
part.
problem.
Thank you.
And then the import in the app.js, we also deleted.
I got that part. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So after we do all that in the terminal, are we still dragging and dropping that folder in the VS Code, or are we opening it from the terminal? Kind of missed that.
You can do it either way, but I think it's easier to drag and drop that folder into VS Code.
Okay.
Max, mine isn't showing the compiled successfully at the bottom.
What is it showing?
It's just wow and then main. It's just empty.
Did you run npm space start?
I did that in my terminal. Do I need to do it from here?
If you're doing it in your terminal, you won't do anything in VS Code. Does that make sense? It's one or the other.
Okay, it showed up there. So I can close terminal and go back and use the integrated terminal if I want.
Correct. And in
Okay.
the integrated terminal, after you close the regular terminal, you would have to run npm start, and then that one will take over instead.
Oh, okay, awesome. All right, thank you.
Brandy, any help before I go on break?
Yeah, I pulled hold on, let me see what it says. So I got it to download, and then I got to the start thing, and then I typed in npm start, and then it just said error.
Share screen. After you create the project, you have to CD into it if you're not doing it in the integrated terminal.
I did not do that.
Yep, it doesn't know which one to start unless you're inside that project. Anyone else need help before I go on break? Okay, go on break. See you guys at 7:25. All right, let's go ahead and dive back on in here. So I am sharing the right screen, right? You guys can see my code.
Max, how do we CD back to like the beginning of our files?
You CD space dot
Oh,
dot
hold on.
enter takes you one level up.
Wait, which one? Sorry. My computer.
CD space dot dot enter will take you
Oh, dot,
one
dot.
folder up from where you were at.
Okay. CD. dot.
And then you can repeat that over and over and over again to get up as high as you need to go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we did all the hard work. Does anyone need help with their project setup? Because if you don't have your project set up, you can't follow along with the next hour of class. Everyone good? Last call for any questions, for any help? Okay, so where are we at? Well, let's talk about the homework a little bit for the yeet. There were a couple steps. One was create the file, the project. The other one was empty out the file, the app.js, so we knew where we were at. The next step was to say, hey, I want to make an input with a type of text. And all I want to do, so I save that, I come back over here and I've got my input, right? Now, what was the homework assignment? It was to say, whatever I type in here, I want to show up down here. So let's go through those steps, because that homework assignment, if I pull it up, we're looking at Canvas. I swear to God, if you don't have me signed in, I'm going to kill someone. If we look at that homework assignment, oh, just take your time. It's not like I'm in the middle of teaching a class or anything. Seriously? There we go, finally. All right, if we're looking at the homework assignment, we're looking at 1 through 3, and we're like, all right, all of that is pretty straightforward, right? All of that is, all right, step 1, create new project. Step 2, start the project. Step 3, add the input. Okay, we're fine until we get to number 4. And number 4 is where the engineering starts, because we look at number 4, and number 4 isn't really 1 step, it's 3 steps, right? We have to make we have to know what concept we're using in the first place. We've got to import that concept. We've got to set up that concept so we can use it. We have to take that concept and attach it to the input, and we need to actually get that input, the text to show up. So we're going through 1 through 3, and all of this makes sense, but number 4 all of a sudden is 5 separate substeps that we got to identify here. So that is all engineering is taking a seemingly complex question and breaking it down into simpler parts. That's exactly what we're doing here. Step 1, we got to figure out what this React concept is. Well, it has to do with the fact that some data is getting entered, and we want to be able to display that data. Because it's data being displayed, that concept that we want to use is state. Okay, how does state work? Well, I'm going to come over to my React, and before I can even use the state, I have to import use state from React. Okay, identify the concept, done. Import it so we can use it. Number 2, done. Now we've got to set it up before we can attach it. So how do we set it up? We say const, and I'm going to call it search text. That's going to make more sense in a second. What do we have with state? We always have 3 things. We've got the variable that the search text, or that the state variable is stored in. I'm calling it search text. We get this thing called set search text because we can never update search text directly. We have to use that set function. And then what do? We use state with an empty string. Why is it an empty string? Because I want the text box to start out as empty when we start. Okay, step 3, done. We identified the concept, we imported the concept, we set up the concept. Now, where are we applying this? Well, we have to hook the 2 together. We have to tell it, hey, on change, when this text box has something typed into it, when this text box changes, an event is generated. What do you want to do with that event? I want to take the event, go get the target that the event was on, that happens to be the input, grab the value out of that target, then set it into our state. The problem is, once we do all of that work, we also have to tell the input, hey, the value that I want you to use is the one from state. So how does that work? Let's flow through that really quickly. Use state comes in from React. We take this empty string and we put that empty string into our search text. Now, nothing happens until we come down here. We have our value of search text, so we link it to here and we go, okay, search text starts out as an empty box. Now React is done. Has nothing else to do until a change happens in that input. That change is going to generate the event. We are going to get the value out of that event, and we are going to set search text. Set search text is coming up from here. So what we're basically doing is taking this value, setting it into the search text, which is ultimately updating this right here. Because this is updated, now whatever this value is essentially is getting sent in to the value of our input. Does anyone have questions about that?
Can you please start over from on change, please?
Yeah. So once we get everything wired up, the computer is done. It showed everything. The input's empty, no problem. what ends up happening is when we type a letter into that input, an event is generated. We get the value of the target that the event was on. We then take that value and we set it into search text. Where does search text come from? Set search text comes from our use state. So what we're essentially doing is taking this value inside the set search text, putting it in set search text, and updating the search text right here. Because that search text is now updated, we also update the value of the input because search text is connected because we set search text from the search text from the value of the event on the on change.
Understood. So if we compare this to JavaScript's terms, search text would be a variable and set search text would be a function.
Set search text is a function, but the function that it's closest to is saying like document get element by ID inner HTML.
Okay. So every time we use a use state, that's what it means.
There are always two things that come from the use state. One is the actual value of the variable in use state, and the other one is the function to update that value in the state.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So for that one, I did mine a little differently. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, 'cause I don't know. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, so for like the change to like put it like here, like I just made like his own variable up here. Is that okay? Or should I
That
do
is
it-
totally fine. Yeah,
Okay.
let me explain through that. So what you are looking at here is, hey, this might get messy. What if our on change wants to do 20 different lines of code here? Well, this is called an inline function. It's also known as an anonymous function. Why is it anonymous? Well, because we didn't name it. We didn't say, hey, go do this thing on the change of the function. Some people, especially if it becomes multiple lines of code, don't like putting a lot of JavaScript in their HTML section of the React. They like to extract it out. So what Kenny did is he said, hey, let's do this thing called text input. And when there is text input, it's going to get an event. And what's the event going to do? It's going to set the search text. So let's call it text inputted. Now I can do a text inputted here. And what's it going to do? It's going to take this on change, and instead of running it inline right here, instead it's going to go up, connect to the text input here, and then run whatever code is in here. Both of these are exactly the same thing. The computer doesn't care how you write it. If it makes more sense to you to draw the line right here and say anything above this is JavaScript and anything below this is usually HTML, except for a couple links to variables, that is totally fine. You can write it either way. Any questions on this? Plush.
Why did we not pass like an argument to text inputted on change?
You can't pass arguments unless you surround it in an anonymous function. So what you would basically have to do if you wanted to pass input to this is say event, and then the curly braces, and then pass the event here. And obviously that is now more lines of code than just doing the set search text inline. So by doing just the text inputted here, it is automatically taking any parameters that the on change generates and passing them to the parameters of our function.
Understood. Thank you. Yeah, I forgot that from JavaScript. Sorry.
So
Any other question? Yep, go ahead.
The main difference here is just that like we've separated the JavaScript from outside of like doing
Yes.
it. Okay.
Yep. We can literally take this whole thing, drop it in right here, and it does the exact same thing. The reason why sometimes we separate it out is because this is only one line of code. So when it's one line of code, we usually get away with doing it inline. But sometimes you are going to have a save button with an on click, and there are about 40 different lines of code that you have to run when that thing is saved. So because of that, once those inline functions that are triggering based off an event get very long, we move it up to the top of the file. Any other questions? Okay, so we come back over here, and if I look at my app, it looks like nothing has changed. I type in ABC and nothing shows up here. And I'm like, oh, well, what was the homework? Make whatever is typed into the input show up in an H1 below the input. So all we need to do is come over here, throw in an H1 and say, hey, the search text is going to show up in there. So I save, I come back over, and now I type in ABC 1, 2, 3, and it shows up in an H1. Curly braces, like a template literal, without the $sign. We don't need the $sign in React. Or saying, hold up, I don't want the words, the letters SEARCH to show up. I want you to go get the value in JavaScript and drop that down in here. Seeing all of this, do we have any questions about how it works, why we need it, any of that? I am going to drop a link to the live share because we are going to continue working on this project. We good? Okay. Only one new concept that we're covering tonight, and that is called use effect. Use effect is basically saying, hey, we don't want you to run this API call every single time this component refreshes. Every single time we return something new, we don't want you to make an API call. We only want you to make this API call when the page first loads. In order to do that, we go to this import up here, and I put a comma, and I say use effect. The effect of this page loading is going to be whatever we tell it to do. Now, I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to say use effect. And I'm going to give it 2 parameters. The first parameter is a function. This function, well, not 90. This function is what's going to happen when the component first loads, when this page shows up for the first time. And to tell it that I only want it to happen when the page first shows up, I'm going to pass in this empty array. This array is called the dependency array. It is basically saying when any of these dependencies change, go run this effect. But we don't want it to change except for when the page first loads. Because of that, we put in those empty array. If we forget that, this function is going to run every single time a letter is typed in. We definitely do not want that. So everyone here, make sure that we've got a comma and we've got an empty array of square braces right there. That is saying only do this when the page first loads. Otherwise, if we forget those, that use effect is going to run every single time a letter is typed in because it's reloading that information. Good so far? Okay. From here, we're going to make a new function in here that says make API call. And because API calls are asynchronous, I'm going to label it as async. And because I just made that a function, I need to store that. So, or I need to call that, excuse me. So I need to call my make API call. If I make a function, it's not going to automatically run until I put these parentheses at the end of it to tell it to run. Now you don't need to do this, or if you want to, you can, but I'm going to pop open a new window and I am going to go cheat. I mean, use my resources to pull up week 13, day 1, because in week 13, day 1, we have this thing called make API call. And that API call is getting the response and it's parsing out the JSON and it's giving us that data. And all of that is awaiting on the response, and the response is awaiting on the fetch. But you notice all of this kind of looks pretty similar. It's almost like I could copy this whole snippet of code, come back over to my make API call, paste it in, and console log out my data. And if you would like to copy and paste that instead of typing that out, that's totally fine. We're going to take a break after this step. So I'm going to head to my Finder. And while it looks like I just have my input, it looks like nothing has changed. If I inspect, we can see my array of movies. Anyone does not have a WoW movie in their browser with the name of the movie and the character and the current WoW in the movie and all of that stuff, go ahead and raise your hand. Jen, what's up?
I don't have it.
Share screen.
Oh.
Refresh. You broke it.
Yeah, I'm breaking everything today.
You know what? Let me try another refresh. I just stopped my server. There it is.
Okay.
I was
Maybe.
blocking it. Sorry. If you didn't have it in your console, refresh your screen now. My live share was hijacking your code. So refresh and make sure that you have it in there now. Does anyone else need help? Corwin, go for it.
Yeah, I don't know. Let me oh shoot, I don't know. Oh, there it is. I done broke it.
Okay, so head to your terminal in VS Code.
Okay. I do believe this is it.
Yep. And where is your terminal that's running the server?
So I had opened it and oh, I forgot to open the terminal again. I'm tripping. I had to restart my computer and I completely forgot about that. All right.
There you go. So just right click on app.js and open an integrated terminal. And then npm start.
I can't type today.
Okay, that's not important. You still can't type.
I'm typing too fast. I need to, should I close this one out?
So if
Alright.
you refresh in the browser, do you have it in your console now?
Yeah. It's like two movies, but yeah.
Yep, cool. If you have two, that's
Alright,
totally normal.
Yeah. I mean,
Anyone else? Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
I mean, my code is working. I see in the console log. Is there a reason why we have two like arrays?
That's a good question.
Because
Yeah, so whenever you're doing local development, the use effect runs twice so that it can debug whether or not you have an infinite loop in your use effect. So when you send that code to production, it will only run once. So it is okay that you're getting it twice. Just ignore that for now. That's completely normal. It won't cause any problems. Tara.
I think I might have, I don't know what I did. Let me not say that. Yep, I don't know what I did. I'm gonna share my screen. Something's off.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, use state is not defined. This is a very good error for everyone to see. That means that we started to use state, but we didn't import it. So if you look at the very top of the file, you have use state, but you got it.
Oh,
And you're good to go.
okay. Thank you.
No problem. This is a very common error, so it's a good one for everyone to see. Does anyone else need help? Okay, so let's go back to where we're at. We have our use effect. We've got our data. We've got it showing up in the browser. How do we take this data and make it show up in our screen? What concept do we need to use for that? Normally, Kenny, I'm very glad you gave that answer. Inner HTML and DOM. That is the vanilla JavaScript way we would do it, right? We would update the document object model by using .inner HTML. We do need to parse it, Ali, but we're already parsing it with this .json. The parsing is getting that data all set for us. We don't want to append it either, because append is like a similar idea, right? It's saying go to the document object model and add that in. We don't need to stringify it, Ali, because stringify is the opposite of parse, right? They sent us a string and we parsed it out into this object. Palash, Shannon, you hit the nail on the head. We need to use state. Think of state as kind of the state of our data. It is the, that you hear State of the Union. What is State of the Union? The annual presidential address. It is saying, hey, here are all the current things going on with our country right now, right? State is the same thing. We're saying it is the state of the page, the state of the data, the state of the information we are displaying to the end user. Now, we already have a use state up here. That's okay. We can have an unlimited number of variables in state. And state can be any kind of data type that JavaScript supports. So this state happens to be a string. But what I want to show is the video and the set video. And that is going to come from my use state, but this time I'm going to start it out as empty. And I'm going to do my use effect. I'm going to have my text inputted, but down here underneath my text inputted, I'm going to say if there is not a video, if that video has not loaded in yet, return a div that says loading. So my use state up here, and then my if there is not a video, return loading. Well, now I've got a perpetual loading screen. Why? Because I've got my video, I've got my set video, I'm making the API call, I'm checking to see if there isn't a video, and I'm displaying the loading screen. What am I not doing? I am not taking this data and setting that data into the video. Okay. So component loads for the first time. It kicks off our API call. Because it's async, it's going to run that in the background. It's going to make that API call. While that API call is running in the background, it's going to come down here and go, there is not a video, show the loading screen. Then this API call finishes running. It's going to go parse out the JSON. It's going to give us our data. That data is going to get set into the video. The set video here is going to update the video here. Because that video updated, it's going to say there is a video. So bypass this if statement, don't return loading, and instead show this input in the H1 instead. Do we have any questions about that flow? Well, so far, we've done nothing with that API call except set it into state. We're bypassing the loading screen, that's working, but let's do something with it. So if I go look at my HTML, I had to do this giant template literal before, right? I had to say video control source, and all of this is in my JavaScript code. It's kind of ugly. But look what I can do here. I can copy this whole string. I can come back over to my WoW app and paste that in. But now, instead of having to use a template literal, what I can instead do is say, go get the video from the video.1080p. Nope. From the 1080p. Why can I do that? Because look, in this content over here, I've got video, and inside that video, I've got 1080p. One mistake that I made was look in our data. That data's in an array. I don't want it in an array. I want just that object to get set into my data. So I would say bracket 0 here. And we run into one other issue. Pausing here. Does anyone have questions about this? We brought over our video. We style it. We say our source tag is coming from the video. Where is video coming from? Video is coming from our video in state. Where does video get set? Set video gets set from the data coming back from our API call, and it pulls the object out of the array because there's only one movie. So we want to go get that first movie in the array and set it into the video. So I come back over here and I look at all of this, and I have this runtime error. And this is a callback for Goggin. Goggin asks all the way at the beginning of class, how do we take some HTML and make it a React project? Well, what are things that we know that are different between React and vanilla JavaScript or vanilla HTML? One of them is that we use class name instead of class. So I look at this code over here, and I don't have a class name anywhere. I just have, controls and style and all of that stuff, so I'm good to go. What's another thing we know? The style does not take a string. And that is exactly what this error message is telling us right here. The style prop expects mapping from style properties to values, not a string. So what we need to do is say, hey, this is now an object. And this object, because it has a % sign in it, that's a string. And this now gets camel cased. I save, I come over here, and what do I have? A video clip. Okay, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to do a quick review through all of this, and then raise your hands if it's not working and you think you've made it to the end. I know that was a lot of little steps here, so bear with me as we review this. First things first, we need a place to put this data in state. So we say the video is where that data is going to be saved. Set video is the function we use to update it. Use state and start out as empty. Now, when you make that API call, parse out the JSON, take the data and set it into state. That means that down here, if we don't have the video loaded in yet, show the loading screen. But if the video is loaded in, go use this style, which we have to convert to an object because we're in React, and go use video. Where's video coming from? That is coming from our state, which we are setting from the API call. Then come down here, go to the video, and pull out the 1080p. Set that as the SRC tag, and now it will show up over here. At this point, I know we're 30 minutes away from the end of class. Push through. Doesn't matter if your code is working or not, but if you don't understand how this code is working, raise your hand. Or if your code is not working, raise your hand.
So I just have a quick question.
Mhm.
So let me see. Where it says source,
Mhm.
we're using that. Like, what exactly does the source element do?
It's like the source element in an image. It is like
Okay.
setting the file path or the URL of the video.
But the video is showing up because we brought that in using that
API call.
okay. But I'm like, if we didn't have like the 1080p, would it just show the link? Like, are we seeing the video because the video is
Yeah, so take a look at the data coming back. The data coming back has this thing called video in it. And then the video 1080p has like the whole file path of the video that we're pulling.
okay.
So we're basically taking this whole thing and dumping it in to the SRC element here.
Yeah.
And we can prove that because if we inspect this element in our console, we actually see the source being dropped in there.
Why does it play though, like on its own? Why does the video show up itself instead of just, is that because we picked that 1080p?
Because it's in a video element.
Oh, okay. All right.
Right. It's kind of like, why does the image show up? Because it's in an IMG tag, the same kind of thing. If we wanted to, for some reason, don't follow me, just proving a point here. If we wanted the video URL to show up, we could paste that in there and that's how it would show up. Right? Because we put it in curly braces, so it's JavaScript. It's going to the data, it's going to the video object, it's pulling out the 1080p key, and it's showing us that value. But because we're putting it inside a video tag and inside the SRC, it knows to use that URL to show the actual video at that file path.
Okay. Really?
Kenny, what's up?
My code's not working, but I think I know why. I'm gonna test something out.
Sure.
Never mind, fixed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Balash, what's up?
Mine is not working because it says like undefined is not iterable. Type error.
Okay, share your screen. It's probably an issue with your loading, but let's take a look.
All right.
Oh. The 0. Not video. I think. Video. Refresh your browser screen. Okay, you've got me stumped temporarily. Seems to be mad on app.js line 6. Can you give me, thank you. Here we go. This should be use state, not use effect.
Oh, gotcha.
There we go.
Works. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, I have another quick question, but we're
Shoot.
probably gonna. So, like with this is kind of like I have a question too, like with this and like because of the API project. So if we call now instead of having like I get the whole like using the effect so that it doesn't make the API call every time.
Yep.
But if we have, how do we get like it to show up multiple times? Like, so do we have to make like with the HTML output, do we have to make so like if we wanted like another thing with like the videos that are 840 or whatever whatever those settings are for that video, like how do we get that to show up too? Like instead of like we have the 1080, but if we wanted under it like the next class of video, how do we get that to show up too?
So I could copy and paste this whole thing. And let's make it just 50% just so it's more obvious. And then down here, I'm going to say show the 480p version. Now, if I come over here and scroll down, I've got my little 480 version.
Okay. All right.
Is it 420? I think it's 420. No, let me look at the data again.
I was gonna say I'm not really sure.
480p. No, 480p should have worked. There we go. Now it's working. The big one and the small one.
Okay, so I get that too for the video. What if we wanted to send in? What if we wanted to send in like some different data, like instead of the video, we send in like the movie title?
So let's say that's an H1. It's a good question. Let's look at the data. The data has something in it called .movie, right? So all we need to do is say, hey, throw in an H1. Now go into the JavaScript, use video, which is in state, and show the movie.
Okay, I think I'm kind of so the reason I'm asking, I know this is like off topic for class, is because of the API project, but we didn't do that in React. So if we went back and set it up in React, like will we then, because in that one, like I know they had the empty HTML elements, which kind of confused me. But in this, like you can just pass it through using the curly braces.
Correct. And you can capture if it's not loaded in yet with this if statement.
Okay, yeah, I like this.
Goggin.
So why isn't the movie and the name matches?
Oh, I was hoping no one noticed that. It's a really good question. I think it has something to do with the fact that we're on local, so that API call is happening twice.
Like,
But
is it just random both times?
It is random both times, and the last feature we're going to work on will prevent that from happening. Okay. Before we move on to that, I don't have an answer as to why it's different. Don't worry about it for now. The important concepts are what we've covered so far.
Okay, I just have one more question.
Yeah.
So So I know how we pulled the video out using a dot notation. Now,
Yep.
if we wanted to add something next to it, so like if we wanted to add the title next to the video so that it did show like the title with that specific video, like is that possible inside those braces?
What? Well, like we're showing the movie here. What do you mean?
Like instead of so like you see how we have video dot movie and then Cars 3 pops up?
Yeah.
Is there a way also to put, so how we have dot video up there, like could we have a way to add like dot movie up there as well? Like both
No,
of them?
because we're looking for just the URL right up here.
Okay.
Right. So just throwing dot movie in here, it's going to be like, well, there is no dot movie. If we look at the video is a URL, right? So it's a string. There's no thing called dot movie inside of that.
All right.
So we have to work with the data format that's provided to us in the API.
All righty. Okay,
But
like
if we wanted to make, like if we wanted a dash to show up and then the video dot year, we could throw that in here and then it would show up.
Oh, okay. That's cool. All right.
Because dot movie and dot year are available in the data.
Okay. But if we wanted to like access, like could we do that for poster too?
Yeah, but poster, you want to be careful because it's a JPEG, right? So the poster, we would do it like this. We would say, hey, an image is going to show up with the src of video.poster. And now the poster shows up.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Palash, what's up?
I forgot like why do we put 1080p in quotations and bracket notation?
We have to, because if the key starts with a number, we have to use bracket notation. We can't use dot notation.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right. This is the point where if I have lost you and you are too embarrassed to say that I lost you, you message Mel and Mel messages me. Or Mel comes off mute and asks the question.
Just a quick question. Any additional styling that we wanted to do to the video, we would do it inside the curly braces with like the max width. We would just separate it by a comma.
Yep. So if we
Okay.
wanted a border of solid red to show up, we would throw that on and you get a border on that.
Okay, thank you.
I figured that out, Max. Kind of.
The double video?
The name that doesn't match.
What did you figure out?
So anything after the name of the movie, it comes right. Anything after like the poster is right. So if the hunting, if the movies, well, hold on, let me see. The hunting 99 and the title comes first and then comes the movie.
No, because this is from the internship and it still says Marley and Me and has the Marley and Me poster.
After the name, that's what I'm saying, like after the title.
Oh, including the title.
Yeah, after, yeah. I don't know. It worked kind of.
I don't know what's going on there. If you look, there are two API calls happening, and this is happening because it's on local. So the video that we're getting is from this first call. So this clip is from Hall Pass, but all the information down here is from Cars. So it's because of that double use effect that's running that's causing the issue on local.
Got it.
But I don't have remove the react.strict mode from the app tag. I'm gonna try this. No one follow me yet because it could break everything horribly. Yeah, so if you want to fix it, you can. Don't follow me on this unless it's really bothering you. But if you go to index.js and you take out the React strict mode, it fixes the problem. The strict mode is, and that would only be an issue on local, is what's causing the use effect to run twice, which is normal for development. But that's what's causing the data to not line up.
Oh yeah, it works.
I'm sorry, did you just Google something to find that out, or?
I sure did.
Okay, I'm just wondering, like, how we would, all right.
I said prevent double use effect on local, and it says simply remove the React.strict mode around the app tag. And so that's what I did, is I went into index.js and made it just render app, and that's what fixed the problem.
Okay,
But
you.
again, that problem would only be a problem on local. Once you deployed the site would work completely fine. So it's not really worth like getting wound up about why that's a problem and how it's fixed. But it is a good question to say, how did you know how to fix that? How did you not know how to fix that 5 minutes ago and you now know how to fix it? It was totally a Google.
And
Okay.
I'm sorry, one more question. You found out the use effect was what was the issue by looking in the console?
Because this console log was running twice.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Very good question. I usually like it when you guys call me out, believe it or not. Keeps me on my toes. Palash asked, would you recommend free code camp for React? I would, but not until the end of the end of this week. Give it another week, see if it's clicking. If it is clicking, don't go off on another path. If it isn't clicking, then you can either do free code camp in React, or even better, free code React's official documentation. Go through that, see if that's helping. If you are struggling with a particular concept. So right now, if you're saying, I do not get state is confusing the hell out of me. I've seen it twice now. It is not clicking. Instead of going out and doing an entire React tutorial, instead head to react.dev, which is the official React documentation. Go to the API reference and go over to use state. And inside of this, it says use state is a React hook that allows you to add a state variable to your component. And you're like, thank you, Sherlock. That is not helpful at all. But if you click on state variable, it brings you to this learn React section that tells you state is a component's memory. And it gives you a whole breakdown of all of this. This, by the way, I did link in one of the React resources. I forget where I put those, but anyway, I think I posted it in Slack. But this will give you a whole breakdown why we can't just use a regular variable, how we add state, the fact that we use state, what does the difference be, what's the difference between this and this? How do we make it interactive? How do we update the state? How do we use state? What's going on here? All of that, that's going to give you a breakdown. So if you are someone who likes to understand it entirely before you use it, if you are someone who learns concepts before you use it hands-on, I would recommend the React documentation. And I will share this link in here.
Yeah, that should work, because I'm struggling with the terminology. Sure.
Oh, Mel beat me to sharing that link, but Shannon, you've got a really good question about what a React hook is. I'm very hesitant to describe what a React hook is because I'm going to describe it very poorly. So, yeah. I should have prepped for that question because it's a totally fair question. A React hook is basically hooking into the functionality that React provided for us. So think about a hook as kind of a class that we use in Bootstrap. So in Bootstrap, we use a particular class. How do we know how to use that class? Because we go into the documentation, we see it. Well, why are we using that class? Because we're hooking in to a component, to a class that's already been built. We use that same concept in React. We're hooking into functionality that has already been built. And whenever we use a hook, we're going to see it with use in front of it. Use state is a hook. What does use state do? It says when we put data in here, the component's going to automatically update. Okay, what is use effect? We're using the hook, the use effect hook, to hook into React functionality to say only run this code when the component first loads. So hooks are the way that we can hook into existing React functionality to make our components run certain sections of code when an event happens. So a hook is almost like JavaScript's version of an event. And I use that analogy loosely because we still have events in React, right? React events and JavaScript events are almost the same. So it's kind of like hooking into another layer of React, unlocking more functionality of React by hooking our code into it. Is that helpful? Now, I'm very curious to see. Hooks are special functions that are only available when React is rendering. They let you hook into different React features. Okay, see, now I beat my imposter syndrome a little bit. I tried the answer. I was bullshitting about 50% of it, and then I read that and went, okay, I gave a better answer than that. See? Such a great teach. Oh, excuse me. I was unmuted on that. Okay. We feeling good about this so far? I'm going to do one more thing and then we'll call it a night. If you are tapped out, if you are understanding this code, if you are feeling like you are burnt out, stop writing code. Just follow along with me here. You do not have to turn this in. I'm not going to yeet you on this. I'm not going to put this in Canvas. I'm not going to push you out of the nest. Totally fine to follow along here and not code if you don't feel like it. All right. We've got this input, and every time I refresh the page, I get a new movie and I get the poster, and all of that's cool, but none of that is happening up here on this search input. What if I want to be able to type in a movie name and have a clip from that movie come back? Well, in order to be able to know how to do that, I need to look at their documentation. And in their documentation, it will show me for the random wow, this random that I'm using right here, I can pass in a movie as a string and it will show me a clip. So what do I want to do? I want to say, hey, I'm going to put this whole input in a form. And that form is going to have a button that says search. And that button is going to be a type of submit. That form is going to on submit to a search for movie. What is search for movie going to do? I'm going to say const search for movie is going to be async because we're making some API call. We are going to take all of the stuff that we're doing right here and throw it in down here. The only difference, I'm going to make this a template literal instead of a string. Again, do not panic. I know I'm going fast here. You do not need to follow along. Stop me at any time if you're like, well, I don't get this concept. I'm going to do all of that work here. And what I'm going to do is it says I can pass movie as a query param. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to put in a question mark. Because we know query params go after the URL with a question. I'm going to say movie equals, and what movie am I passing in? I'm going to pass in the search text. You have any questions about that? Now I come over here, go to React app, I type in Zoolander, and as soon as I hit search, nothing works, and I'm a terrible developer, and I don't know why you guys follow me. Why didn't that work? Movie, query param, Zoolander. Oh, I know why. Event. Prevent default. Do not refresh the page. I'm taking care of this. I'm making the API call. Try that again. I come over here. I do a search for Zoolander. I hit search. And I get Zoolander as the clip. Okay, let's try that again. I come up here, do a search for the internship. I hit search, and look what I get, the internship. So, last concept, I'm gonna let you guys go a full 5 minutes early. I know it's not like me, but how did we pull all of that together? We already did the work to take this input and hook it up to state. That was the first thing we did tonight. That state is updated up here whenever we type in a new letter. That means that whenever we search for a new movie, we can take whatever variable is in state, pass that on to our API as a search parameter. And when that data comes back, because we're sending it in the right format, it knows to update our state.
Okay, I just have a question. So when we use when we did search for movie and then we did the async event, why do we, so the second API call is just bringing the data back up so we can
Yep.
use it again?
Yep.
Okay.
Except this time it's passing in the text of whatever got typed in compared to this one, which is just bringing back a random one.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
Definitely complex. We've got maybe 2 or 3 more React concepts to go in the next week and a half. And then we dive into full stack and making our own servers and databases and all of that. But React is how we cross the line between website and web app. We've got a ton of data that we're working with here, right? And it's really laborious to have to do inner HTML every time, to loop over the data every time. This, we can separate it out and go, hey, this data is going to update. This data is interactive. Because of that, we're going to use React State to do that. And we're just going to template out all of our code. Then anytime we update that data, when that API data does come in, we're able to access it directly. That is all we are doing tonight. I will stick around for a couple minutes and answer questions, but hopefully I did not fry you too much. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow, same time, same place, and I will stick around for questions like Jen's.
So anytime I type anything in, I am just getting like whatever I type in above the video, and I'm getting the poster for what I type in, but I'm not getting the video for what I type in.
Oh God, I was afraid you were going to ask that question. I think the way we can fix that is in this search for movie. What we basically need to do is set the video back to null, because we want to show the loading screen while it's pulling in the new video. So now if I come over here, I've got the big year And if I do a search for Zoolander again, now I got a Zoolander clip. So this set video to null is what's going to like trigger the loading screen. And that's what's going to fix that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I tried doing what you just did, but I think I messed up somewhere. I don't know how to solve it.
Okay, go to share screen. I was waiting for someone to ask that question, Jen, and I was like, come on, let's get to 8:30 without anyone asking.
Cause I know, cause my thing over here won't be the same as yours. So I assume
Yeah.
that I
So
do like,
you see that set video on line 27 on mine? That's what you need to add below your event prevent default.
oh, this?
Yeah. We basically have to like re-trigger the loading screen, and that goes in that one. Yeah. There you go.
Okay. Didn't fix my thing.
It won't until you search for a new movie, and then it should, unless you've got errors in your browser, and then I need to see it.
Yeah, I'll show you the errors in my browser.
Okay, let me see your code again. Your input has a button inside of it. That button needs to be moved to outside of the input.
Oh, this one?
Yep. And that should fix your problem.
So I just search for a movie. Okay. Cool.
Jen, I have no idea why your day-night mode would be switching. Other than like if it's set to auto and it's dark enough, it should switch.
I have it set to auto, but it's like switched back and forth like 3 times during this class.
Oh, I have no idea.
Pain in the ass.
My code is somewhat working, but it's doing something funny.
What's it doing?
It's doing like this little I don't know if you can see it or not. It keeps glitching.
Yep. Go back to your use effect. That is one of the easiest mistakes you can make. In the use effect, after the function, you need a comma and the empty array. Because right now it's saying, hey, go do this use effect right there. Yep, throw a comma and then an empty array, and that should fix the problem.
Yeah, thanks.
No problem. Plush.
If you could, like quickly, can you like explain like how it's happening under the hood and under the code? Like what's happening? You don't have to go all detail because I know I remember you saying
Is there a specific part?
complex, like comparing it to JavaScript, like we would loop over through the array, probably push them into a new array, then we like create a HTML, which is the part that I understand. But like how the loop part, like we would usually like
Well, we're
each.
not looping anything here because we're only dealing with one movie. So because of that, we're just accessing that directly, and then we're accessing the properties of that object here.
Okay, gotcha.
And then it's what's happening under the hood is because we're calling set is updating the data up here. And because it's doing that, what React is doing in the virtual DOM in its version of the document object model is it's detecting that because we're using that state variable here, it's automatically re-rendering that for us.
Gotcha. What's virtual DOM of React?
The virtual DOM is like React controlling the document object model for us. So instead of using the actual DOM that the browser uses, React under the hood manages its own document object model instead of making the browser do it.
Okay.
But that is the extent of my virtual DOM knowledge. It's one of those things where it's like, I know it's there, I know my car has a transmission. I have no idea how the transmission works. Same goes for the virtual DOM, right? Like you use the concepts like state that run on top of the virtual DOM, but you don't, you get to control the virtual DOM through hooks. And so as a developer, if you understand the hooks, you understand what you need to know about the efficiencies of React using the virtual DOM, basically.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll have to read up on it. Thank you.
Yeah. Last call for questions. All right. Have an awesome night, everyone. Don't forget to fill out 30-second feedback, right? I need to hear that we're going too fast. I need to hear how you're feeling about this. I know it feels like a fire hose. You've got another week and a half of coming of React. So give me feedback on that, because any concepts that we're not getting now, I can cover in tomorrow's class. I will post this code though up on GitHub so you have it. Have an awesome night, everyone. See ya.